Welcome to the 8th Rockingham County Reads event. I'm Martha Balsley, currently chairman. This year we take turns with this. I would like, if you are a Rockingham County Reads member, I'd like for you to just wave your hand so people can see who you are. Okay. This year we read The Water is Wide by Pat Conroy, and it's about his teaching on Yamacraw Island, just off the coast of South Carolina, in an all-black school that has been very neglected by the governing school district on the mainland. And those of you that have read the book know how that went. Some of the children didn't even realize they were part of the United States. And we discussed the book at various sites around the county. Now, we're alluding to the book tonight, but we've had our discussions at the various libraries. Tonight we have a group of educators who have graciously consented to be on our panel, and I would like to introduce them. Dr. Rodney Shotwell, Superintendent of Rockingham County Schools. Dr. Jean Steverson, Assistant Superintendent for Instructional Support. Ms. Joyce Anderson, a retired elementary teacher of 42 years.
Right, so.
You don't look worse for the wear. Yeah. Miss Jessica Clark, who is our Rockingham County Teacher of the Year. Good for her. She's at Moss Street. And I think you are, what are you doing? Tell us.
I'm an intervention specialist.
Okay, that's good. We have Dr. Cindy Corcoran, who is head of our Exceptional Children's Program. We have Elliot Miller, who is the principal at Reedsville High School. And we have Ken Scott, who is the director of middle grades. And we said, that's quite a job. Our moderator tonight is Rochelle Tucker, whom I'm sure many of you know. The Tucker family has been very much in the forefront in education in this county for a long, long time. All right, the way we're going to do this tonight is that we have made out questions for our panel, but we also would love to entertain questions from the audience. We want audience participation. And so we're going to give a few of our questions to the panel, and then we're going to open the floor for questions from the people that are here, if you have any. And I'm going to turn this over to Rochelle Tucker, and she's going to get us started.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm not quite sure how I got rigged into this assignment. I'm still trying to figure that part out. Maybe everybody else has said no. And somehow I happen to say yes, but nevertheless, it's, you're welcome. Good to be here, good to see you, good to be seen, good to be on this side of the dirt. I was at a homegoing celebration earlier today, and every time I am a participant in a homegoing or funeral service, I'm just even more grateful of additional time, because when I leave out, I'm thankful that I wasn't the one lying in front. And that means that the Lord has left me here to continue to get things together and to do what He has assigned me to do. So I'm indeed honored to be asked to come. Now, in my talking with the Rockingham County Reads folk earlier, I was instructed that maybe I should tell you, now, this is not a school board meeting. We don't want anybody to feel like they've been put on the spot. I know some of y'all have been kind of in the hot seat at the school board meetings and at other sessions where we have the educators and the school board members. But tonight is just an opportunity for us to raise some issues. I think one of the problems that we have around this county is that we don't really spend enough. Now, this is just my opinion. They didn't tell me to say this. Since I'm up here, I have the mic, so I'm going to say what I think. in my opinion, we don't spend nearly enough time in Rockingham County talking to one another about things that are affecting our people. Educators and school board folk and commissioners and all of them make decisions on things. And I think I even mentioned that at the last commissioners meeting that I went to, and I talked about some things. What I see is that we ought to come together. The Bible speaks about come let us reason together. And so when we have issues and things that are going on within our county, within our school, I think we ought to come together and discuss those things. I don't know everything, you don't know everything, but if we put the little bit that we know together at the table, then we just might possibly come to some kind of resolution about some things. And so tonight, not that we're trying to resolve everything, all of the issues that were raised in this book, but we are at least able to put some things out on the table that we can dialogue. These educators can share with us their opinions, their thoughts, their statistics, their numbers, their knowledge, whatever it is that they want to share. You receive that, and then you have the opportunity as well to ask, to entertain other information. And I think that tonight just kind of sets the stage for the future, because we're not going to be here all night. We'll only be here for a limited amount of time. So I'm hoping that this will lead into some other discussions, that we would come to some group sessions and we would sit around the table and talk about what exactly is happening within our school system and what we think we can do collectively to share one with another to make things better. Y'all agree with me? All right, I didn't think it was such a bad idea myself. All right, tonight I have been charged with asking one of you the question. However, if there is a burning answer deep down inside, someone who does not get the question, please feel free to let me know that you would like to respond to that question as well. So I don't know a whole lot about y'all's background, so I'm just going to shoot some stuff out there, and there may be somebody else that's a little more well qualified to answer that, or if you all kind of get stuck. I think most of you received the questions, and maybe one who's just a little new at this has not received the question, so we'll be gentle with anyone who's not received the question. All right, let's get started here so that we can move the night along. All right, I'm going to ask this question of Dr. I'm sorry, what was the last name? Corcoran. Okay. Dr. Corcoran. As students leave an elementary school to attend high school, and they've been educated in a school that's labeled as, quote, low performing, what measures are already in place to assist students in their possible achievement gaps?
Well, I think a lot of things happen in order for us to see that transition from elementary school to middle school to high school. As you know, our teachers, and I truly believe this, our teachers are very interested in how our students are doing. And they're very interested in helping students close that achievement gap. And so one of the things that we do at all of our schools is we always have opportunities for transition activities between those schools. So the one thing that we want to do is to make sure that those receiving schools of any students from any of our feeder schools to our middle schools and then from our middle schools to our high schools, that there's conversation between those schools directly about those students, and that they already allow them an opportunity to know what possibly might be some challenges for students, and then to identify those challenges and to work towards helping those students. I can think of, for example, an opportunity for improvement in attendance. You know, as we all know, attendance plays a big role, that if a student is absent in school, then they're going to have issues and concerns. There might be some issues that pop up with that. So related around just the attendance issue alone, to allow schools an opportunity to know and then to work through social workers and other individuals in that school that support and pay attention to attendance, and then to make sure that they catch that as that student enters that next grade level. So I think that's really important, is to know, the community to know how much we do in transition to help students transition from one place to another. Now that's a brief idea, and I know we have a very short amount of time, so that's pretty much what I think in terms of just want you to know about transition more than anything else.
Okay, thank you. Is there an answer burning with anyone else? Okay, then we'll move along. Let's come to this side and let me ask Dr. Stevenson. Has there been any discussion concerning returning to year-round school? It seems that children forget so much of what they have learned in school during the summer months. Also, so many students are eligible to receive free breakfast and lunch. So it seems like having a school on a 12-month basis would be so helpful in that respect. Could you speak to that?
I could speak to it in an informal way. There are always discussions. As you know, at one point, we had several schools that were on a year-round basis. They get the same amount of days in school as our traditional students, but get breaks at different points. Their breaks are after every 9 weeks instead of every, during the summer where they would get most of that time. We have tried that. We have one school right now, New Vision Elementary, which that is still a year-round school. And there are some advantages for people who want and like that schedule. I think there's some advantages for specific students, but I'm not sure that it is ideal for every family. We are, at this point, even considering, and Bill Holcomb is here, so I'm going to speak and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but the free lunch, free breakfast issue is always a concern because we are a district of low wealth. We are looking to see right now whether or not we qualify to provide free lunches possibly to everyone. And that's just kind of a new idea. We don't know if we meet the qualifications, but all of these things are topics of discussion.
Okay.
I
thank
would
you.
like to speak to that
Okay.
because I have 10 years' experience in Danville at a year-round school. And I think like Mall Street, when it did year-round school, I think it was a mixed school, half traditional, half year-round. The school I taught at Schoolfield, and it was totally year-round. And it was a low-performance school. 83% of our students were on free and reduced lunch. But their achievement was at grade level when they did testing. There were a lot of factors that accounted for that. With the 3 weeks off, the intercession, you couldn't require those students who were behind to come, but we strongly encouraged those students who were behind in any of their skills to come for 2 weeks. Everybody was off the third week. And we also provided enrichment opportunities for those who were doing just fine. So they got a chance to do things they wouldn't ordinarily get to do, which was good. And so that gave them a chance, if they were behind in math skills or reading skills, to catch up. And that even though they were not required to come, about 80% of them did come, even those who didn't have to take advantage of the enrichment activities for the gifted and those who were doing just fine. I need to say that the principal was impassioned about it, and I think that's key. And her passion rubbed off on the rest of us. And I think anything you do, you have to be passionate about it. You don't teach 42 years unless you love what you're doing. All right, so I think there are some benefits if it's done, and like Dr. Stevenson say, it depends on parent and all that. But that's one example I know it did work because we strongly encouraged those students who were behind to come. And for teachers, they didn't have to teach. I never taught intercession, as it was called. I was retired already. But it gave the young teachers a chance to really have a smaller group to work with and to make some extra money. That's how they did it. But there are benefits to it. And as far as the lunch issue, they got to have lunch and breakfast those days. And what they hated to see snow days. And the reason they hated to see snow days is they might not get lunch. So our principal was so caring, they got lunch. She would make sure they had a bag lunch to take home. And she did all kinds of other additional experiences, sort of like the water is wide, but she did a lot of them within, had groups come visit, had, just lots of and the parent, that's another key. We would have parent nights where they would leave kindergarten or first grade with the take-home packet to help their students. Parents don't want their students to do bad. But they do what they know. So that principal was so passionate. She made sure that we helped the parents to be better parents by giving them tools that they could use. So it does take a special situation, and I think a special leader and special teachers to do it. But that was a positive experience. And the students, because she was so passionate and made us, they achieved on grade level, the majority of them.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, for both of you. Let me ask our Miss Jessica, our teacher of the year. In the novel, Pat Conroy cared deeply about the students. He often thinks outside of the box to devise creative ways to enhance the academic and cultural experiences of his students. Each year, it seems, school funding is reduced more and more. What can we do to be more supportive of the efforts of our teachers in Rockingham County?
Well, we've been very fortunate at Moss Street this year. I know many of you know that Lawsonville merged with Moss Street this year, and Rockingham County has really stood behind us in helping with that merger. Our fifth grade students just took a trip to Washington, D.C., for example, and most of our students could not afford that trip on their own. We had enough donations so that every child that wanted to go and was able to go could go. I think they brought the price of the trip down to $50. And even if they couldn't pay that, there was still more support to make sure that those students could go. So we've been very fortunate because we've had a lot of support from Rockingham County, and we are hoping that that support continues. I think we've had a lot of visitors in our school this year. We've had people come in, just to see what kind of programs we're running and, what exactly our teachers spend all of their time doing. And they are offering support. We have a parent involvement center. The county has hired us a parent involvement facilitator. It's her job to help us get parent support. And the community members are helping her to get volunteers into our school, to get some of the stuff done for teachers that they don't really have time to do. And they also have, they've invited in people to read with our students. We have we have some lunch buddies that come and spend time with some of our students that don't have a mentor, and they read with them. Some read, I think, maybe up to 2 or 3 times a week. We have volunteers come in to read with our students. And so I think the important thing that has already happened for us is we're getting the community support that we've always needed, and that Lawsonville, I think, had it when they were a school on their own. So we're very thankful for that.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's come over here. Don't want y'all to feel neglected on this side of the room. Is it Dr. Scott?
No, Mr. will do just fine.
Mrs. Scott. All right, Mrs. Scott will do just fine. Let me ask you this. Studies have shown that having a diverse teaching staff is important to closing the achievement gap. What is actively being done to achieve a more diverse teaching staff and to recruit more minority teachers in Rockingham County?
Thank you. I think our boss, Dr. Shotwell, certainly has a heart for increasing the level of diversity in our school system, and of course the Board of Education. Also, I see Neil Rose out there. Absolutely, we have a heart for doing that, and I think you can probably see within our schools and within our administrative teams that there is a good level of diversity on our teams and in our schools. But of course, there's work to be done in that area. One of the things that I know that Jonathan Craig at the Personnel Office does, we make absolutely certain that we hit all of the historically black colleges and universities during their recruitment days. And most of our principals make an effort to really look and try to find minorities to come into their schools to teach. With all of that said, we need good teachers first. The biggest, we talked a little bit about year-round school, and I know that we'll get into some more particulars about education, but I don't want this to get lost in the conversation. The greatest indicator of student success is that relationship between the teacher and the student. It's what happens between the time they get off the bus at about 8 o'clock and the time they board the bus at 3 o'clock. That is that relationship with that teacher. So white, green, blue, polka dot with stripes, whatever that teacher looks like. It's important, but in my mind, it's secondary because we need to put the best possible person in front of these kids and the best possible person in front of our most needy kids if we're going to make any kind of difference.
Okay.
Can
Thank you.
I add one little line? I don't mean to talk too much.
It's all right.
But I think what he said is absolutely true. And that will be a tie-in with the book. They didn't care that he was white. They don't care what you, I mean, it's important to have diversity, don't get me wrong. But it's more important to have somebody who has passion and cares. If you don't care, they know it. I used to have a good friend of mine who taught 43 years. And she always said, they don't care how much you know until they know that you care.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, let me move back onto this side and ask Mr. Elliott. In the book, The Water's Wide, Conrack employs various teaching strategies to reach the students. How important is having the ability to adapt teaching methods to the students in order to achieve the maximum results? And do teachers in the classrooms today have that freedom, or is it one size fits all?
It's all important. If you look at one of the greatest teacher of all time, if you look at the teachings of Christ, he always had these examples that were relevant to the people he was talking to. Okay, if he's on a hill and he's talking about a city on a hill, you can't hide it. The point of that was it taught to the people that he was speaking to, his audience. If you don't know your audience, whatever it is you know, the depth and breadth of your knowledge and wisdom is for naught. It falls on deaf ears. I know some Chinese, and I could start talking in Chinese, great truth, and you guys all just nod off and go to sleep. So it's all important. Without that, then the teacher is just a clanging cymbal, basically. So it's all important. Do the teachers have the right to do that now? What teachers at all levels are kind of stuck to now is, we've got these tests that we have to make sure that the kids are prepared for. The danger is that you look at this test and you only focus on that test and nothing but the test, where the fact is you have to focus on the children and know the children, know who they are. That's a relational piece. It takes time. But once you know the kids, know what's important to them, what's valuable to them, and then take that knowledge and present it in such a way that they're going to get it, they're going to understand it. I can only speak to in my school. Do I allow my teachers to do that? Certainly. Yes. The more creative, the better. One of the dangers, and I've seen this too, is that a teacher will do a wonderful, beautiful activity, but if the activity was merely fun, but they didn't teach much, again, that's wasted time. So the balance is, and what you're looking for, the great teachers that we look to get is those that understand the knowledge, have the vast depth of knowledge that is needed, but then also has a relational piece that's able to touch out to the children and be able to get this go from A to B. I think in a lot of our schools, and again, I can only speak to Reedsville High School, that I certainly give my teachers the power to do that because it was mentioned earlier, without the passion, nothing's going to come out. They're going to be half of that. And if all that a teacher has is a principal with a thumb on top of them, or if school board making them force them to stick to this book, passion dries up like a desert, and nothing's going to happen.
Okay,
I'd like to
Thank
add
you.
something
Sure.
to that, I'm sorry.
that's okay.
I teach at Moss Street Elementary, and we are very fortunate because our principal allows us to do whatever needs to happen in order for us to get the point across to our students. So in my classroom, within the same lesson, we sing, we get up, and we move around. I use visual strategies as well as auditory strategies, and it's not all direct instruction. The Common Core is forcing us to, make sure that kids know how to collaborate. And so you see that collaboration in our classrooms. If our principal walks by and she doesn't hear anything happening in the classroom, that's what would alarm her. She doesn't get all up in arms because there's a little bit of chaos in the classroom, because in that chaos, that's where they're learning. So, and we do have that freedom to teach our students in the way that we know best. She trusts our professional opinion.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. All right, Dr. Shotwell, you've been mighty quiet tonight, and that's a little uncharacteristic for you.
I'm not in church.
Hallelujah. All right. All right, let me ask you a question. If life is a game, the playing field must be level. If life is a race, the starting line must be in the same place for everyone. How do schools level the playing field for students who do not have the same resources or support at home, i.e. printers, internet access, books being read to them, so on and so forth?
I think that's always been kind of the age-old question, and it's been our role as teachers for as long as you could go back, even to colonial times, to get the kids to learn, no matter where they might be. But what's happened to us, I'd say over the last 90 years, there's been more and more and more social things that have been added on, and sometimes we're consumed with having to teach, like from like 1910 to 1900 1910. One of the first extra things teachers started doing was teaching basic hygiene. And and we've added character education, anti-bullying, anti-sexual harassment. Everything keeps getting added. Nothing's getting taken away. No more hours are added to our day. No more days are added to the calendar to try to get that in there. But the unfortunate thing is that children cannot help the home for which they're born into. And quite honestly, that's why you have teachers. I would say 99.9% of them went into this to help kids. But how do you do it when you sit here and you do a brief assessment of a child, similar to what Mr. Kahn, what Pat did, and it's all over the place. I mean, I went to register my youngest child for kindergarten on Tuesday, and they asked basic things, all the alphabet letters, shapes, colors, numbers. And then, and I sat over there and I watched them kind of input this information after they get finished and everything. Well, the child right before Josh only knew one letter, G. So what if they're in the same classroom next year? Well, that's going to be a challenge. But you know what? For me, I think that's the wonderful thing about our teachers, especially in this county. I mean, I have to brag about our county here. Our teachers go overboard to try to make that work. And there's resources out there, the Parent Resource Center that we have, the Title I schools. Even if it's not a Title I school, we're going to find a way to try to help those children kind of level that playing field. But it's not going to happen that very first year. That child's going to require more work and more intervention, and splitting that teacher's time up is always going to be a challenge, because then you've got another child over here who wants to be challenged on the other end of the spectrum. And how do you do that? And oftentimes our teachers do it by splitting them up into teams. And, sometimes people pick on that, saying it's the bluebirds, redbirds, and other kind of birds. Well, I hate to say it, but the kids know that too.
Yeah.
no matter how bad you try to cover that up, they know which group they're in. And I guess that's what Ms. Brown said when she stood up in the in the front and said, "Y'all know who you are," and we all know who they are. As they went down that list. But leveling that playing field is just so impactful. Like for me, when we instituted the technology, one of the things that one of our grantors, I guaranteed them that the schools with the highest impact of poverty, regardless of size, would be getting more of the technology on the front end. I had a school with 300 kids that received 9 active boards. I had a school located in another part of the county that had over 500 kids receive 2. Right or wrong, the difference is that this school over here can raise anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000 in a weekend with a fall festival. This school over here tries to do the same thing with very active and very loving parents, and they bring in $700. You'll never get that equal playing field. And I mean, quite frankly, that's how school districts play. If you look at like Orange County, a teacher with 30-plus years can get upwards to $20,000 supplement. Well, nobody's getting it here. And no matter how much that the state has tried to put in the low wealth formula to try to help counties that are poorer, there's always going to be that gap. So we've got to figure out a way to kind of bring it up. And for me, I have a unique background. I've experienced poverty, knew what it felt like, knew what it looked like. And so, yes, I have social justice in my blood. And whenever that happened, the schools that had resources said, you know what, that's a really cool idea. So let's raise money and put them in the schools. Now, some people will say, well, that's not fair. You're asking parents to raise money over here for this school to put the stuff in there, but then over here at this school, you're paying for it. But in the end, aren't we all trying to do what's right for kids? And they did. I didn't tell them to go raise the money. They did it on their own. I didn't say, y'all are not going to get any more active boards. Because eventually I would have gotten them all active boards. But it's after I impacted those kids. And whenever I brought some of the members of that board to Lawsonville, to that first grade class, and they saw this little girl that may or may not have had a bath the night before, get up there, and 3 weeks into school, be able to point on the board and move shapes and tell exactly what the geometric shapes are, that was powerful. And that, for me, was leveling the playing field somehow. I can't level it in terms of being supportive when they're at home. We send backpacks home at all our schools. A kid gets sent home with a backpack. And I hate snow days too, because I know that if it happens on a Thursday and we're out Thursday, Friday, the next hot meal that child's going to get could possibly be that next Monday morning. And they're hungry. And so there's Maslow's basic needs. How do you take care of that? Because if you don't take care of that, they can't move up the ladder. And they'll never get to self-actualization because they're always worried about how they're going to get this. And as a school system, we do a 110% effort for fighting a windmill with one horse and one sword.
Okay, thank you.
We know that our kids come to us at different points academically, but they also come with different social needs or health needs or other needs as well. And we do have a good counseling program. We have social workers in the schools for those cases that we cannot address without the help of DSS or law enforcement. We have school nurses. We have solicited the help of our dentists to provide dental services and screenings for those kids who are hurting. We have homework assistance lines, so those kids who don't have parents at home in the evening can call in. Or if parents need that assistance as well and want to help their child, they can call in and get that assistance. We have our Exceptional Children's Program, where students are individually assessed and individually placed in programs and with assistance to help them. So we're trying to meet their needs, not just from the academic level, because the playing field is not level. It's not going to be level. They're going to come with different needs.
And I'll say this
Thank
about the technology piece for wireless. Those kids have a keen awareness of where the free Wi-Fi is located. And surprisingly, when we gave the kids surveys last year when we handed out the Chromebooks for the first time. The Regional Area Foundation wanted to know how many of the kids had internet access. Now, that varies from old-timey dial-up to broadband. But 80% of our kids, at least in the high schools, and I think that's a pretty good representation, said that they had access to it. Now, what that looks like, varies, but they do have access to that, and lots of businesses in the county have also been very understanding in terms of letting our kids, have that opportunity. Once the tower out here in Wentworth, you know what happens out here. Your phone goes dead because it's constantly looking for a signal that's never there. And when that happens, it's really going to do a lot of coverage here, and we're just waiting to do an experiment with some of our longer bus routes to have internet access on there so those kids, when they're on the bus for an hour, hour and a half, can do their homework. And it's still filtered just like it is at school. But, I mean, it'll be really interesting to see how that plays into it, too. Or the possibility, it maybe sometime in the future, that if there's a high concentration of kids living in maybe a housing project, you bring the bus out there, you say, you're going to have the ability to connect to the internet from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock. So, we're constantly trying to think of different ways of making sure that our kids have access to information, because it's no longer being able to graduate from high school. It's about making them tech savvy, because a child who's illiterate in the computer world but literate in the written and spoken word is still going to be behind.
Okay, thank you.
One more thing to add,
Yes.
if you don't mind. I guess you can tell I'm kind of passionate about this particular question.
I see that.
There was a story in the book, for those of y'all who read the book, that was kind of gut-wrenching to me, about a fisherman who was recounting a story. I guess somebody else was recounting the story that was passed along to what happened to him as an infant. In the crib, mom goes out to the local club on the island that night. Somehow he tries to get out of the crib or something, but anyway, he gets his little foot caught in the rails, and he hangs there dangling, crying, until mom gets back from the club. Now, you talk about a level playing field. How do you level that playing field between a kid that could happen to and Dr. Shotwell's kid that he just described, or my child at home that I just described? You might appreciate this, but this is what I thought about when I read that particular story. I think it's Proverbs. You might have to correct me. The spirit of a man will sustain his infirmities, but a wounded spirit, who can bear? Nobody. And so one of the things that I'm so pleased with, a good number of our people in Rockingham County that work at our school system, is that they really care about doing everything they can do to put those little pieces back together. But it's not easy. And sometimes it seems impossible. But anyway, that's what I thought about when I read that particular story. It kind of goes back to that relationship piece.
Thank you. Wonderful answers. Ms. Anderson, you jumped in on others, but let me give you one specifically. Mrs. Brown, the other teacher in The River is Wide, reminds us of the Pharisees in the Bible. They were more interested in following the rules than they were in caring about people. In our education environment today, the tests are the driving focus for teachers. Are we in danger of turning our teachers into clones of Mrs. Brown?
Well, that's a deep subject. I think it's a double-edged sword, as one who's been through it. Our curriculum, I'm going to go way off and then come back. You hear all the criticism of the core curriculum. I think the core curriculum, if done properly, has the potential for getting rid of some of the bubble tests. I'm not a big fan. I want to be held accountable. But I'm not a big fan of all the multiple choice testing, because I think kids have other strengths that test will not capture. And I think In our case, we have so much to cover. Like they say the average Japanese textbook was like 98 or 100 pages. Well, look at a history book. They kept growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you expect it to cover it all. And my thing is, if you give the child the tools that they need, if they don't cover all the information in that book, it won't matter so much, especially in an area like history, if they have the tools to do what they need to do. And that's bringing me back to the core. The core reminds me a lot of the International Baccalaureate curriculum, which was a European curriculum, but it came about to help the diplomats' children who were moving around everywhere, and they wanted to be sure that they were able to have a basic set of skills. What the IB program emphasized was reading, writing, thinking, talking. Really understanding it. And almost all of the tests were essay tests. When I was IB coordinator, there was one multiple choice test in biology. Everything else, including math, had an essay element to it. All of the reading required extensive thinking. Now, when I look at the Common Core, it's requiring the same thing. Being able to think critically, read critically, write well, and what's the other? Think. All right. And it's spiraled. That's what the IB curriculum is, spiraled. It starts at a low level, teaching the basic skills. Then they keep adding a step, adding. You don't forget what you learned in kindergarten, but you keep adding and adding, and it's not so cluttered with so much that they learn a little bit of something and understand nothing. So I think if we keep following that approach, it took some of the life out of teaching for me. Because I was used to being a creative teacher. And though you can have some of it, with that constant multiple choice testing, it takes some of it up. And I don't think you create thoughtful learners. I don't think you create critical thinkers as much with it. So I've always had an axe to grind with it. And I'm going to give one more example, and then, not because I didn't want to be held accountable. I'll guarantee anybody, if you let me have your child for a year, they will progress a year or more. Now, this is the last thing I'm going to say. When I was in Danville, I taught 4th grade, 4 years, 5th grade, 6 years. And we had tests in all the subjects. And one day, I decided, I don't care. I'm going to do some learning that my children are going to enjoy. But, as Mr. Elliott said, they will also learn the content. I had this one little boy, I'm going to call him Johnny. He was overweight, he was shy, he rarely talked. And in history, there were certain groups of people you had to know. So I thought, okay, I'll let them choose a person. They'll have to research that person. And I was fortunate. We had 6 computers in the room back then in the dark ages, and that was a real blessing. And it was because it was a Title I school and we got a little extra. So I had it arranged where they could get to the computer. Anyway, to make a long story short, and I said, you're going to make an oral presentation. You have to give it to me in writing, document it, and give me an oral presentation of 3 to 5 minutes. And you have to become that person. Well, on the day we were going to do it, Johnny, who never speaks, who's always quiet, he comes to class looking excited. Then when it was about 10 minutes before time to present, his grandmother comes. She has his costume. Well, he goes out, he comes back. He was King James I. King James I. He used they could use an index card with notes. He used not the first note. He stood up there. He performed. All of his classmates were like, who is that? And I was like, who is that? But He had all the facts right, he had everything right, but he became King James the First. And all the students just clapped. From then on, Johnny taught. From then on, Johnny had some friends. There is no bubble test that can measure that. And I rest my case.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, oh, yes.
One of the things that I heard her say is about students talking, learning to talk, to converse with each other, to converse with adults. And one of the things I think everyone needs to know is what we are doing in our preschool programs. You know, Rockingham County is very interested, our schools are very interested in making sure that we identify those students and those children at an early age, at the age of 3, who can come to our preschool programs and who are getting just that kind of instruction. Although it's grounded in play and it's grounded in fun because they are, after all, 3 years old, we also are trying very hard to make sure that we are helping them learn to talk, to complete their sentences, to have complete thoughts about what they want, to verbalize what they want. Remember that many of our children in our system and within the county have difficulty just communicating with each other. They may not have had that opportunity. So even as early as 3 years old, we are working with children to help them communicate, to get along with each other, to learn to play fair, to treat each other with respect, and our teachers work through that. So even from the preschool age to those children that are graduating with us, I think we're working and looking to try to help students communicate. Because after all, in life, what do we do but to try to communicate with each other and to make sure that we understand each other? So I think even at our pre-K level, we are really doing that.
Thank you. At this time, as the hours continue to move along, just want to yield to see if there were questions from the audience.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Can you give any examples?
sure.
Are there?
You know, I can remember, like, when my first child, we decided that he would go to in-home care, and it was a former teacher assistant. This was when we lived in the mountains, and then when we moved here, and he was 2, he was in in-home care again. But then when he got to 3, we put him into a program, into a structured program that has kids of a like age and things. And the thing I saw there was that he learned how to get along with people, how to give respect, a lot of the things that Dr. Corcoran was talking about over here, and working through conflict. Even my youngest one, one of the big things for the Partnership for Children is conscious discipline, about getting them to talk about their feelings. Now, the hard part is when you have a 4-year-old who wants to talk about his feelings to his 8-year-old brother, and the 8-year-old brother really doesn't care. And he's not being heard. He does, resort back to. But, those programs all at least give kids an idea of what a structured day looks like. It gives them an opportunity to be exposed to types of learning, to get them used to some of the basic things that we want them to be able to do when they do get into kindergarten, because there's about 1,000 kids a year that come into our kindergarten program. I would say that there's probably about 400 to 500 that are actually in some type of child care center of varying levels. And then you've got 500 that are being either cared for by a family member or someone else. And you don't know what that level of interaction or education is going on there. So I think anytime that those kids are ever exposed to those programs, it definitely helps. Even the ones who qualify for the North Carolina Pre-K, used to be called Smart Start, then it was more than 4. Those programs are also a way for kids to start getting acclimated to school, waking up in the mornings, having social time, but learning at the same time. And so I do think they have a huge benefit. Now, how you quantify that sometimes I think might be a little bit more difficult.
I'm not thinking about children who might come from your family.
No, I'm talking about poor children.
Who might come from the family where you got caught in the bed and mama didn't come.
No, that's what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
Those are the kids that are in the Head Start program, and kids that also get the spots that we have for the NC Pre-K program. You know, and then the kids that are in the exceptional children's program, once they turn 3,
Absolutely.
we start giving them services at whatever, either at home or in a child care center.
Well, I can speak a little bit to just the relationship that we have with the partnership, because I have a preschool coordinator who is always constantly in conversation with them, because as you know, when they're working with those children that are before the age of 3, and those children might have disabilities, or it may need speech or language, or whatever that child may need, as soon as that child turns a certain age, we begin to have conversations with them about where is that child, possibly a spot for that child in our NC pre-K classrooms, because we want to make that connection. So we're in constant conversation and communication with them about who are those, helping us identify who those children are, and then getting those children properly placed in our school. So there is a lot of conversation, and we are constantly trying to make sure that we're identifying who those children are and when they can come.
I think that question was directed up here.
Yeah, and I know
somewhere.
that Dr. Corcoran is going to want to chime in a little bit because we are working along those lines with a pretty big effort, in particular in the last year or so, to actually take a very close look at that problem. But it's one of those things that I have somewhat of mixed feelings about, being a black male, if you hadn't noticed. Dr. Shaw, I'll give it Dr.
idea.
So you hired another minority.
Thanks.
And I was sharing with Tom before the meeting some of my background. I grew up in a very small, very rural portion of North Carolina, northeastern North Carolina. He mentioned throwaway kids. My high school was on most days 99% African American. And the vast majority of our teachers were African American. Our principal and assistant principal were African American. The superintendent was African American. And by and large, at that high school, we didn't learn anything. Illustration. My junior year, well, I didn't realize that I didn't know trigonometry until I got to college. Because my junior year, I had a textbook that had trigonometry written on front of it. It was right there. And so when I went to take the placement test, the trigonometry placement test in college, I said, yeah, I had trigonometry. It was written on the book, my book as a junior in high school. And I opened up the test booklet, and lo and behold, trigonometry has something to do with triangles. It has something to do with something called a sine. I think I called it a sin when I was reading the book. And something about a cosine. Who knew? Isn't that like on the first page? When you talk, it's such a complex problem when you talk about disproportionality. And so I don't look at it quite as much as disproportionality within the context of a single school, meaning that I was an administrator at school level for 8 years before I moved to district office, and during that time, our level of suspensions at my school was pretty even with the percentage of African Americans and the percentage of white kids. It was pretty even. And the people that I deal with on a personal level, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but the administrators that I dealt with on a personal level, it's just something that just really never occurred to us. Two kids are fighting, and you suspend one kid one way and you suspend another kid another way. It's just not anything that will ever pop into my mind. And really, I don't think it's particularly pervasive with the people that I know. And so this is difficult to say sometimes, but every once in a while, and this is not to say that racism doesn't exist, and this doesn't say this doesn't run under the radar, and we have perceptions of people just because of the color of their skin. I'm not saying that. But sometimes, we got to look in the mirror a little bit. We got to look in the mirror a little bit and say, what am I doing? What's in my community that might be contributing to this? What is in my community that might be contributing to this? And we can talk about absentee fathers. We can talk about a whole lot of things that just break my heart. So that's why I have kind of mixed feelings about that, because I also think that the black community bears some responsibility for addressing some of the problems that are so prevalent in our community.
I agree with that, but having been a product of segregation and having gone to all black schools for the most of my life, I don't want to lead a perception, and I'm sure you didn't mean that.
Oh, no, I have.
That because they were black, they were incompetent. My black teachers in my all black school were very competent. And in fact, I owe what I am today to one of the history teachers I had that turned me on to history. And not only did she teach me history, she provided books for me to read, because I came from a home, we were land rich and money poor. And we didn't have books. And I hate, except the Bible and farmers' planters or something, which I read in the summertime because it was something to read. But she let me borrow her books. And I had math teachers who were very demanding and excellent. I also went to an all-black college. And I had there one of the best history teachers I have ever seen. And I've been to Duke, I've been to Carolina, I've been to all those places. He was a walking encyclopedia. We called him God. He was that good. So I just can't leave that perception that because they were all black, I don't know what his situation was, I don't know what they were, but as a product from all black schools, all black teachers, all black administrators, all black everything, did we have all the materials that the white schools had? No. In fact, I went to a one-room school. One teacher taught 8 grades. We didn't have all those books, but she made charts and everything, and guess what? I learned how to read, and I've been teaching since I was in the 1st grade. Because she found a way. What she did, she would teach 1st grade, and then I was left in charge to go with 1st grade lessons. So I've been teaching since I was in 1st grade. I've had some excellent teachers who happen to be African American, and I cannot lead a perception that because they're black, they might be in. He might have been unlucky and had a math teacher who didn't know what he was doing or she was doing, but I was lucky enough. I took trigonometry, which was the highest we had in our little school. There was no calculus. Trigonometry was it. And he stammered. I remember him like today. But he knew his math. And we knew if we made him angry, he was going to take a while getting it out. So, but he knew his math. And I don't know what kind of situation you had, but having been a product of all black high school, one-room school, which was on my dad's farm, and eight grades in one room, and an all-black college. I just couldn't let anybody have that percent. I had some
Well, let me-
superb
Can I jump in to answer the question?
Hold on, just real quick, Elliot, since she kind of.
I wasn't putting you down.
No, I just
but
want to
when
make
you
sure.
said you
I
didn't
just
know
want-
anything. I
just
didn't want anybody left with the impression
No, I
that
just-
because they were black,
No, I
that's why you didn't know
just
it.
want to make sure that everybody understands. So I'm talking about one particular place, one particular experience. You used the word incompetent for my teachers. I don't know how else to explain it. Either she didn't know or she didn't care. I don't know which one is worse. Either she didn't know or she didn't care. And the point is that for whatever reason, looking back on those years, and I can relate to Miss Brown because I laughed at Miss Brown because I could see her, at least bits of her, in some of the teachers that I had. You got to do the fundamentals. You got to have the fundamentals. The fundamentals? Really, Miss Brown? you want this gentleman to teach the fundamentals? Didn't you have them from kindergarten to 5th grade? Didn't you have the early kids? When they in the 6th grade, those kids couldn't count. They didn't know the ABCs. What fundamentals was she talking about? She was teaching them how to walk.
I'm
Teaching
sure
them how
there
to
were
chew.
teachers like that, but I just didn't have any of them, thank God.
I mean, what fundamentals was she talking about? And so, you know, of course, I wouldn't cast a disparity about any. You know, I'm not casting a blanket statement, but I'm saying that yeah, there are pockets. I experienced a pocket where apparently nobody cared whether we learned a thing or not.
Mr. Elliott, you had something you want to say?
To answer your question, what's going on in my school? Rockingham County Schools, we have there's a student handbook, and in the handbook, there are rule violations. You got level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. And in there, let's say is fighting, okay? And it'll say for for elementary, for middle school, for high school students, these are the consequences. For the first time, the second time, the third time, these are the consequences, and it gives us latitude, okay? Well, what we do, and I have African American APs and Caucasian APs and myself, I'm Chinese, so we all get together, and one of the keys to making sure that you break down that disparity, make sure that there's not, is that we follow that book and we try to be as colorblind as possible. So for instance, today, a boy got hit by another boy. Let you guess what that was all about. It was a girl. And what we did, it didn't matter whether that was a white boy or a black boy. And I won't tell you because it's immaterial to the administration. In that moment, it was like, what's this kid's record? What has he done? He hasn't done anything. He's never done anything before. Let's look over. So let's look in the handbook. Let's look at a fight for high school. The first time you've got blank to blank. And we gave him this, which is the same thing we've given everybody: Hispanic, black, white, male, female, big, little, rich, or poor. First time they did something like that at this level, boom, this is what you got. And we work hard. We keep records to make sure that this boy, you know, if this is the third time he's done something like this, okay, you're getting this. Again, regardless, race, color, creed, sexual preference, doesn't matter. And that's one of the ways that we try to do things, is to be equitable that way. We are consistent. If a boy does this, a girl does this, this is what's going to happen. And at the same time, the other thing we do, we realize, talking about the playing field, one of the reasons why I am the way I am, because I had parents that raised me a particular way. Some of our kids don't have parents to raise them a particular way. They have a parent, and that parent may not be there raising them much at all. So if we hear these little problems coming up, it takes a lot more time, but the administration, again at our school, pulls them in, and we find out that there's a beef between this boy and this boy about a girl or whatever. And it takes time, but it could be a half hour, 45 minutes. We talk it out. We talk about how this is the appropriate way to do. This is how a man acts. Something happens, this is how you should respond in the real world. If you act this way, this is going to happen. If you act this way, this is going to happen. And it's a conversation, and it becomes parenting. You know, in my office, teaching a young man that doesn't have a man at home, how to respond to somebody looking at your girlfriend the wrong way. That's how we do it.
I want to add one thing that ties in with what you said, that the Head Start teachers said. I agree that quite often the young black men don't know how, and like Mr. Miller said, they have not been taught how to respond to a situation. But what they're doing, working with that whole family, is going to help, because then they will be taught how to respond. And I've had situations when I was teaching, same, identical infraction. And some of my students, I say, had learned how to play school better. In other words, they knew the rules. And so you correct them, and they say, yes, ma'am. And so it's over. And then this same young black man who hadn't learned how to play school
That's right.
hadn't learned how to behave and how to react in a situation. Might be rude and talk back and carry on and escalate it. And then you're caught with, well, you know, they did the same thing. But the reactions were different. And I agree with you on that. That's something we have to address. That's something we need to work on. And Head Start, what you all are doing will be wonderful for that. But it is something we need to address as a community. How to react, how to respond in the proper way, and more respect for authority.
It bothered me at the very first, whenever he was trying to have a relaxed atmosphere with the kids, and she says, "You teach colored children differently," and it just seems so strange. It's like, you know, she's making it a race issue and not about teaching kids. And you know, her peering into the window. I mean, I've got this vision in my head. You know, of course, Mr. Scott's got pictures in his book. My book didn't have pictures, but I had some great pictures up here already. I could see her looking in that window just like this. And you know Pat's going to get told at the end of the day that same thing. You have to teach them differently. And so, I mean, I think as a teacher, for somebody to say that, and then you blatantly see how far behind and how much they don't know, and she's supposed to be the rock, because they liked her better than that old bat that's living in the old white school where that one boy was taught. You know, what was it, Miss Grady or whatever it was? You know, they hated her because, so you start getting this impression that Miss Brown is supposed to be this warm and more caring person, but how is she much different than the impression that they had of the retired white teacher?
The answer, should he have listened to her? And I can say this, absolutely. What she said was the same thing our kids will do it. Their meaning was okay, but how they presented it was totally wrong. How I teach, if I were to stand up and teach you guys, is one way. If I were to teach some of my friends from Indiana, it would be a different way. That has nothing to do with color. It has to do with culture. So she was right in that he needed to teach these kids probably different than he taught them on the mainland. That had nothing to do with the color. That had to do with it's a different audience with different experiences, with different needs. So in that sense, yes, he should have listened to her, not just necessarily the way she said it. Does that make sense? And plus the fact that she's an older lady, and older ladies tend to have wisdom.
That it was about culture.
Scott?
Just one quick point, and because Dr. Shotwell alluded to it. Well, two quick points, real quickly. Yeah, Miss Brown, she made sure everybody knew that she was part Cherokee, and I think there was a white couple in the book that also was explaining that you know she's not pure black. You know, pure black is real bad, just kind of like you alluded to. Pure black, real bad. So you know, she's not quite as bad as the pure black people. So that's kind of what you were alluding to. One of the thing that Dr. Shotwell mentioned was, if you remember in the book, there was an instance where the white couple on the island had a child. And when I got to that point and they said that the child went to school on the island, I said, I can't believe that that white child went with these black children on the island. That just didn't seem to go with the texture of the book. And then, of course, I read a little bit further down. They had a separate school with a separate teacher, one child, and then the couple said, yeah, there's no way that our kid was going to get the kind of education that they were going to get at that colored school, I think is what she said. My child deserves just as good an education as any other white child gets in Beaufort across the water. So the thing for me from this book was, you know, we talk about how can we level the playing field and that kind of thing. I know it's complex, but I like to put things in simple terms. When you think as a parent of all the wonderful things you would like to have happen to your child, whether it's piano lessons, whether it's schoolwork, homework, counseling, all the wonderful things that you would like to have done for your child, that's what we should do.
For every child, you're right.
Let's give our panelists a hand.
Get in there, Mr. Scott.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Martha. I know we didn't get to all of the questions, but I think we got to a lot of the subject matter that they wanted to raise out of the book, and I appreciate all of your candid remarks and your frankness and your honesty, and I'm certainly certain that this audience did as well. Thank you.
I tell you, this knocked me out tonight. This was wonderful. And Tom, would you please put the ginger ale in the punch? Okay.
You have an important
We have refreshments in case you need any. You probably, if you're like me, you're so thirsty. I'm about to die here. We thank y'all so much. Oh my goodness. This has been absolutely wonderful. And I'm so glad it's been taped because other people can see this. And this is, here's a reminder. Those of you that got a book from me, please turn it back into the library because it's checked out in my name.
You're going to have to pay for all of them.
Well, I'll see about that. But anyhow, we thank you. And we have a very minor little thing. We have a little gift certificate for you to Barnes & Nobles as a thank you for being on our panel tonight. I just can't thank you enough. Thank you.